Hello, world and universe. Welcome to the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth. And we need to talk a little bit about, especially as an African American man in his mid 50s, about how black people cannot accept self criticism. We are the only race of people that allow debauchery, denigration, hideous, self mutilating words, music, descriptions, life experiences that take place within ourselves and expect nobody to ever say anything about it, especially shed a negative light. We have this no snitching rule where you can do anything in the community to family, friends, and we don't want any participation in criminals getting arrested, helping and aiding in that process. Uh, we want to self-police ourselves, which will lead to the physical, moral, and ethical destruction of our community. And that needs to change. And when an African American or black person criticizes that behavior, especially amongst our own people, we're considered Uncle Tom's, anti-black, conservative, and that's typically not the case at all. Many times in life, you have to look in the mirror, whether it's personally, from a community, family standpoint, make a self-analysis on doing the right thing versus the wrong. Right is always going to lead you to a better and more helpful life than doing wrong. That's just basic common sense. There's no ethnicity behind that mantra. And so I just felt the need to speak upon this because, like I say, you don't see any other race of people that hate the fact that we can self-criticize ourselves, and no other race of folks have a problem. If white folks are doing wrong, you'll hear white people saying that they don't agree with it and they're doing wrong. And we should be able to have that same vestige and that same voice to speak about trying to make our lives and our community a much better place. And as I've gotten older on this whole thing, liberal versus conservative, and watching where the world is going and how things are manifesting themselves, I guess I am pretty semi-conservative in today's time. But also looking back and growing up in the 70s and the 80s, uh, I was semi-conservative then too, I guess. Yes, I went to an all-boys prep high school, went to college, have multiple graduate degrees, and you have to be somewhat conservative in order to go through all of that kind of Americanized intellectual think tank type of institutions. You're not going to garner these kind of heavy degrees at majority white institutions if you come in with a mantra that you can do and say whatever you want. One thing that's great about college and school is that there's a learning, there's instruction, and there's delayed gratification. So if you do A, B, and C, then you will be rewarded with D. There's a certain level of conservatism to that. Doing anything you want at any time, any place, and anywhere is not a healthy state of mind and is not healthy physically, emotionally, psychologically, or anything else. And black people, we have gotten to the place in our music, in our lifestyle, where we want to do whatever we want to do by any immoral, non-social norm form. And when somebody calls you on it, whether it's the police, your uncle, your father, somebody white, black people have a tendency to want to lash out. And that is crazy. Uh, we have to wake up. We need to read more. We need to stop chasing the bag by any means necessary. The level of gun violence and assaults are at an all-time high. Most of the statistics don't lie, where the majority of these crimes that are being committed against black people are being done by black people, not a white cop, not a white person. This is not the 40s and the 50s when we lived in a segregated society. Today, people have free will to do what they want, and we have a tendency to be very destructive. When I walk out of the door each and every day of my house, there's a high propensity and a high probability that if something was going to happen to me in a harmful way, it would probably be done by somebody that looks like me or my son. That's just a fact. And we need to get away from that. And when we are called out on that as African Americans by an African American, that does not make you pro-white and anti-black. So the Candace Owens of the world, the more conservative black people that are talking, even Charleston White, some of these YouTubers that I've been following, that are calling us on our bad and immoral behavior, that does not make them pro-white. It's just a normal level of consciousness to have a healthy society. People want to be safe no matter what color they are. And I think it's more advantageous for somebody of color to criticize and raise the level of consciousness of other people of color versus a white person, because then it doesn't become a race issue. If I criticize a black person, that removes the element of I'm racist. Now, are there blacks that can be racist against other blacks? Sure. But just because you criticize your own race, your own family, you're not going to agree with everything that everybody does, whether it's a family member, a child, a friend. You're going to disagree with some of the things that they do. In the 80s, when I talk about my level of conservatism, I was not a huge NWA and gangster rap music listener or follower. Ice-T, NWA. I liked Ice Cube a little bit. I did start listening. I liked Public Enemy. Tupac was one of my favorite artists, even though he had tons of dichotomies and hypocrisy in his music. He went from love to hate, and talked about his mother in a positive way, denigrated his father. He was peaceful at times, and then he was violent and in his music, and he ended up participating in violence in his personal life, and the end result was his death. I think he's a classic example of a gentleman that had all the talent in the world, and if it could have been harvested and encapsulated in a positive way and led in the right way, I think Tupac Shakur would still be alive today. I think that many of the tenets that Dr. Martin Luther King spoke about in today's time would be applicable to being conservative. So how would young black people feel about Dr. King today, who was one of our greatest humanitarian leaders of all time in leading the civil rights movement? In order for us as black people to advance and elevate our status in life in all socio-economic avenues, we have to elevate in a positive way. And you're not an Uncle Tom if you say to your nephew or to a relative or to a friend that the things that you're doing are wrong and harmful to yourself and to your community and the people around you. That's being conscious, being righteous, living a God-fearing life. And there's nothing wrong with it. Rap music as a whole has been more harmful than helpful to the black community. Period. And the few black rap artists that have made some serious money, how many of them have given back to their community? What was their music about? Much of Jay-Z's music was about drug selling and all of that kind of stuff. Made tons of money on selling this false perpetuated dream. And he doesn't even sell drugs, or really didn't even back in the day. And lives married, lives a very conservative life. So did we fall for the banana in the tailpipe, even following and listening to his stories? Great storyteller, but how much of it was very truthful? We have to get away from living in this fantasy of foolishness and debauchery and thinking that the end result is going to be something positive. So, in today's time, we have to get away from, if a black person criticizes another black person, that they are an Uncle Tom, they are anti black, they are super conservative, they are pro Trump, anti Obama. I'm originally from Chicago, and personally, I didn't care for Barack Obama. I didn't think he did very much for black folks in the 8 years that he was there. I think he did most of his helpfulness to corporate America and Wall Street, which were 99% white folks. He came out of Chicago, which is one of the most dangerous and has one of the highest gang and murder rates in America. He had the highest office in the land and one of the most powerful positions in the world. And he didn't even change Chicago while he was in office. And what did he do in Washington, D.C. for black people overall? Well, you need to read. Read what his legislative votes were, how he legislated, what laws he was trying to pass. How did that affect and enact on black folks during his 8 years? Stop getting caught up in the propaganda just because he was black, that he was great. And this whole ideology that, well, at least he was our first black president and that gives black people hope, black kids hope. Well, that's also a bit of a fallacy because, for one, what you see in today's time, even to be prepared to be a senator, congressman, let alone a United States president, there are things you have to do. And going back to the issue and the experience of college, Barack Obama went to Columbia University and then went on to Harvard Law School. So for young black people that think that because Barack became the first black president that they could become it, then there's things that you're going to have to do. There's sacrifices that you're going to have to make, and you're going to have to be semi-conservative. You cannot be all over the place and be crazy as hell attending Columbia or Harvard. There are certain rules and regulations that you have to follow and carry yourself in a certain manner to enter those schools and to exit those institutions with their degrees. There's a conservatism to that. So thinking that just because you're black that you can be the next president, that takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. Also, the stars have to line up for you. People don't realize that Barack Obama's father had a PhD from Harvard, so there was a legacy issue there that helped him along the way. And Chicago helped Barack Obama. He was a U.S. Senator. He was voted in and took the position of the person that had left. And people should read his book, The Audacity of Hope. A lot of individuals have opinions about President Obama, especially black folks, and they have a monolithic, linear view on him that is all positive. And Barack Obama did very little. Donald Trump has done more for black folks than Barack Obama. If nothing else, look at how much Donald Trump helped the HBCUs financially. That's just one instance. And I can name several other things that Trump did for black folks versus Barack Obama. I'm not pro-Trump necessarily. I'm not Democrat or Republican. I would say I'm semi-conservative at 55 years old and watching the way that the world is transforming. And we have a lot of issues that are at stake. Homelessness, joblessness, opioid crisis, mental health issues. Now we have this huge migrant crisis that's taking place. We're starting to have more and more liberal laws that are taking place. The Safety Act in Illinois. the no cash bond in LA County. Cook County and LA County are two of the toughest counties. Both cities are inundated with gang violence, and now we're letting people out under their own recognizance and their word that they're going to come back to court for minor infractions. Well, what is a minor criminal offense? How do you define that? Black Lives Matter was not a proponent of that. They only protested when a white cop killed a black pedestrian. They also garnered over $100 million based off white guilt from liberals, and they did absolutely nothing with the money. Mind you, black on black crime is taking place each and every day, and Black Lives Matter never protested one day for any of that. So does Black Lives Matter, or Black Lives Matter when a white cop kills a black pedestrian? And statistically, that happens less than 2% of the time throughout this entire country. 98% of the time when a black person is murdered or killed is by somebody that looks just like them. That does not make you an Uncle Tom. Those are the facts. If you look at the school system in Chicago, in our urban markets, black kids are scoring in math and science at the very bottom, nationally, locally, statewide. It is a disgrace. We have been brainwashed as black people to think that there are only two or three ways to make it out of the ghetto: selling drugs, playing sports, or becoming a rapper. So sports and entertainment, and if those two don't work, we go right to the criminal world with gang violence and all of that. Well, nobody's talking about, I remember in the 70s and 80s becoming a firefighter, a police officer, a police chief, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. Those were the biggest rewards and the biggest things that you wanted to do in life. Young black people don't talk about that at all. It's degrading rap music. It's degrading rap music for men and women. Complete debauchery. Nobody wants to go to school anymore. Nobody wants to pick a book up. We want immediate gratification. Nobody has the patience for delayed gratification. And we've gotten away from the very framework of family and love that had garnered most of the black individuals from the 70s and 80s and 90s to even go to college, get law degrees and all of that kind of stuff. And we've completely gotten away from it. We're looking at LeBron making 60 million, Kanye West, and we're so unconscious today that just because a black athlete can bounce a basketball, that does not make him an expert in business, politics. We are listening to these people and worshiping them like deities and idols, false idols, and living this false dream that does not exist. And even with the Barack Obama, the black president, there are things you have to do to even set yourself up to even become a congressman, a senator, let alone the president of the United States. And are you willing to make those sacrifices? If you're not willing to make those sacrifices to put yourself in that position, then it's just a dream. And it's a false dream that will never come to fruition. So we have to get away. I had to do a YouTube channel or YouTube storyline on or video on this whole thing. Like Candace Owens, that young lady is a very bright lady. Many of the things that Charleston White talks about. Remember Dr. Ben Carson, the neurosurgeon that was part of Trump's office. Everybody called him an Uncle Tom. The man is an exceptionally bright individual. Straight out of Detroit, went to Yale undergrad, University of Michigan med school, Johns Hopkins Medical, and then became a neurosurgeon. do young black people have any idea how hard that is to attain? No different than Barack Obama going to Columbia